Hi, I'm Grandpa Neil, aka Neil Taft. We have a website called caringgrandparents.com that has a rather interesting origin story I want to share with you. About 15 years ago, my grown son, Chuck, called me and said, Dad, you want to go to a seminar with me in Atlanta? I said, What's it about? He said, It's about Web 2.0. I said, Chuck, I can't even turn a computer on, much less do anything with it. He said, Come on, you'll learn something. And besides that, we get to hang out for the weekend. I said, okay, because any chance to hang out with your grown son is a good chance. So I went with him and we learned a lot. We came home, we got busy, we created a couple of e commerce sites. We did pretty darn good in the next year and a half. Well, somewhere along there, I called him up one day and I said, Chuck, I've got an idea. I want to come up and have lunch with you. He said, okay. I said, I'll drive up next week. Well, I did. And we went to lunch at a nice little cafe in Asheville, North Carolina. And we had a good conversation going. He said, Dad, what's your big idea? I said, I want to write a blog. He reached across the table and patted my arm and said, Dad, you know I love you, but he said, blogs are hard. He said, you'll write a blog, and two or three people in the family will follow it for a week, maybe two, but then even they will wane. I said, Chuck, that's okay. I'm committed. I want to do it anyway. He said, okay, find me a subject you are passionate about. I said, that's easy. Grandparenting. I said, I'm the best grandpa I know. He said, okay, within that, find a pain point. Poke the pain point by telling stories about it, and then offer solutions. I said, okay. So I came back down and I began to think and write. And I wrote a dozen or so articles, and I started getting people commenting on the site. Well, I kept writing and writing, and about 30 or 40 articles in, I called Chuck up and I said, Chuck, let's look at the metrics of this website. There were 1,000 people a month viewing my website, and I was getting email interaction. He said, we're getting there. We've got traction. He said, the next step is you write a one pager and we offer it on the website and people leave us their emails. So I think I wrote 10 tips to being a good grandparent or whatever. And we began to get responses to that. He said, Dad, that's a pretty good one pager. Why don't you write a pamphlet? I said, okay. So I wrote 5-6 pages pamphlet. He read that and he said, you're on a roll. Why don't you go for a book? I did. And several months later came a book called No Greater Loss, about grandparents who were alienated from their grandchildren and not having visitation rights, etc. About a year or so later, I revised that book and added some to it, and I wrote a book called Grandparents' Rights. That went along, and then life happened again, and I did not contribute a lot. I was up to about 400 articles on caring grandparents, and I just sort of let it languish. Well, then about 10 years later, I ran across an old friend, a gentleman named Jack Canfield, gentleman up here holding my next book. Jack Canfield is the author of Chicken Soup for the Soul, the #1 selling nonfiction book in the world. He has sold over 500 million copies of Chicken Soup for the Soul. But what I knew about Jack is I ran across Jack when I was doing youth ministry, and he was a self-esteem teacher in those days. And I learned a lot from him, a man of integrity. So I signed up for a seminar he was giving, and he convinced me that I had a good idea. So over the next several months, I wrote my third book. The third book is called Good to Great Grandparenting. This book had more positive ideas. The grandparent rights road is a tough road, but I learned a lot along that road, and I wanted to move into the modern era of grandparenting. So Good to Great Grandparenting gave me an entree into that. And then the following year, I wrote another book called Caring Grandparents after the website. And that's my present book. I'm working on a new book called Transcendent Grandparenting. Now, I say all this to say I am an accidental author. I always have considered myself that. I love writing. I love grandparenting. I love my grandchildren. Above my head, you will see that picture is 5 generations. I am a great, great grandpa, and I am passionate about grandparenting. So just wanted to share that story. That's how we got here. Caring grandparents will continue on. And as long as I have breath in me, I'll continue to write about grandparenting. Thanks for listening.